All right, let's get some insight on the latest China manufacturing economic data from Carsten Holz. He's a professor at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. Carsten, thanks for joining us. Good to see you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, let's get straight into it. Factory activity in China in September rising slightly to 49.8, up 1 basis point from August, but still just on the verge of that contraction number, which is 50. Anything below 50 shows contraction. Now, given the economy is rebalancing towards a consumer-driven one, is this a concern for you?
No, I'm actually quite happy with that outcome. It seems the PMI's signal, everything has stabilized. The manufacturing PMI has stabilized. The service sector PMI has stabilized at levels that are not great. They're used to boom times in China, but at levels that are acceptable. Just for comparison, the US PMI in manufacturing is at 53. China is close to 50. Service sector PMIs are very similar. So China is not plummeting. It has stabilized. It has reached a base. And there's hope that it will turn around and move upward. The other item that you already mentioned is service sector is very important in China. It contributes 45% of GDP compared to manufacturing, which is only 30%. So in the West, we are used to looking at manufacturing in China because that's what we see. We see the electronics goods coming out of China. We see the household goods coming out of China. But we don't see the service sector. The service sector is located in China. So I'm quite optimistic the service sector keeps growing.
Do you think that the service sector and consumption, very much the bright spots here, are expanding at a rate fast enough to compensate for the slowdown in manufacturing?
Here again, I'm quite optimistic. What I'm seeing is the wage increases, something that's perhaps not been recognized as much as it could have been. We have seen more than 10% real increases in wages over the last 10 years in China. We have just seen another increase in minimum wages in China. So the bottom wage level, the minimum wage, has increased, has quadrupled actually over 10 years. It has increased in real terms by more than 10% per year. At the upper level, if you look at 200 million urban formal sector workers, their wages have increased by real 10% per year. Your wage hasn't increased by a real 10% per year. Mine hasn't. In China, that's happening. And where is that money going? Where is all that increase? That's a sevenfold increase in a very few years. It's just a fourfold increase in 2004, a sevenfold increase in the mid-1990s. Where is all that money going? And the real estate boom has pretty much run its course. There's not much more that can be bought in terms of housing. Urbanization rate is at 55%, so there's going to be a bit more investment in real estate purchases of houses.
Right.
But that's at the end now. So where is that money going? Well, it has to go into consumption somewhere. So we see it in Hong Kong. You see, yes, please.
Let's focus back on the services sector, because when it comes to measuring it, many say that the official data does not give an accurate picture, and that is actually stronger than it appears to be. A range of important industries are not included in China's services GDP. Hundreds and thousands of street vendors like food merchants and cobblers, that they're not registered for tax, their activities ignored by official calculations. The whole domestic services industry, millions of nannies not included. The World Bank is for a while saying the country's domestic services industry needs to be included, and the real estate industry, another area. Do you think that the services data is inaccurate and that is, in fact, it could be much better?
I think it is quite accurate nowadays. If you go back to the 1993 tertiary sector census, the National Bureau of Statistics found 30% more output in this service sector. 2004 economic census, it found 15% more. 2008, it found a bit more. 2013, it pretty much capped the original numbers. So I think the data are quite accurate. The NBS obviously doesn't have data on the individual small employers, the Goetihu, the individual-owned, individual employed people. It doesn't have data on those, but it does surveys. And every 5 years, it does the economic census where it tries to capture all of these small vendors. So the data that it has on a quarterly basis or an annual basis is not complete. But if it makes assumptions. The enterprises that we cover are representative of the rest of the economy. Plus, then we do sample surveys of the small economy in localities, and we say, okay, the data that we have on the larger ones are representative, but we need to add a little bit because the small ones have grown faster or slower. So I think the National Bureau of Statistics, the NBS, does a pretty good job at trying to come up with an accurate final number that incorporates both the data that it has and the data that it doesn't have so much, but has sample surveys.
All right, Carsten, the government expects China to grow by 7% this year. What's your forecast?
I think that's realistic. Let me just give you an example on the service sector. If we look at quarterly GDP growth rates in the service sector, financial sector in the first and the second quarter of 2015 has grown at 19%. That is unbelievable. How can a service sector, how can finance grow by 19% on an annual basis? I mean, people are not working 2 hours extra in the banking sector every day. And that's something, that's a technicality of GDP. How do we calculate GDP in the service sector? In many industries in the service sector, we calculate it for the income approach. We do not have value added for finance. So we ask, how much does it cost to produce the final services? And how much it costs is wages, and then a few other things. Now, there have been large wage increases, including in the financial sector. So the tertiary sector services, in good part, is different from manufacturing. Here, the government can increase wages and thereby push up GDP. So the government has a number of measures. It's not just about stimulus and investment and production and manufacturing.
Right.
It is actually in the tertiary sector, strangely, about raising income.